Hi, I'm Shannon Hopkins from Rooted Good, and I'm here with Mark Elsdon. Our theme this season is Church Property, Imagining Good Futures. We are hosting this season because we believe that this is an important moment in the church in America. The church is in the midst of a great transition. Churches' economic models are changing, and the way they think about and use their property and land are up for grabs. And as churches engage with their buildings and land use, it is providing rich, robust, compelling, transformative work in our communities across America. As we've been working with churches across America, we're getting a common set of questions. Things like, what about rural churches? What about things other than housing? And what about members that don't want to change? And while there are many questions, there are also so many amazing stories of churches rising to this moment. And that's why this season, we just want to introduce you to the pastors and leaders that are stepping out and showing us a new way. Their stories are phenomenal, and their work is helping to lay a path into a new and good future for the church and for the world.
Our question for this episode is, what about rural churches? So much of the conversation around church buildings and land relates to urban or suburban churches, and people often ask, what about rural churches? So we're talking today with our guest, Kevin Riley. Kevin is the pastor of Mount Baker Presbyterian Church in Concrete, Washington, a town of less than 1,000 people. But Mount Baker Presbyterian has become a hub in the county. It is providing recovery services, an emergency shelter, meeting transportation and food needs, and many other things in addition to the worship life of the congregation. As they're meeting needs in the community and coming alongside opportunities and gifts that they find, they're encountering partners and resources that they didn't know were there and putting them to work in some incredible ways. So, Shannon, what was one thing that you really loved about this conversation with Kevin?
Well, I'm telling you, the impact that they are having, both really practically saving lives and becoming the leading service provider in the community. The outsized impact of this church, it just blows you away. I'm stunned every time I talk to Kevin, but today it's just like the scale of the impact is so phenomenal.
He was saying they started with 5 people when he got there. The church was 5 people, and they're now doing multi-$100,000 grants with the county and with all these service providers, and they are literally saving lives almost daily, which is pretty remarkable. I think it's fascinating too the way they were uncovering these other funding sources like grants and things that churches often don't think about, and in partnerships with government agencies and service providers for healthcare and hospitals, and then using their land. And, it's just full and rich with all kinds of great stuff. And anyone that thinks that rural or small churches can't do this work, well, they certainly can. And Kevin's story shows it.
Absolutely. I just have to say before we dive in, I think the other thing that's so compelling is it's his story. Like he's just an unusual leader. He's not your typical pastor, but I just love it. And his story is so compelling.
It is. Well, let's get into it and let's hear what this conversation was like with Kevin.
Hey, Kevin.
Hey, Shannon.
It's so good to see you today. Thank you for joining us. As you know, we're doing this podcast where we're talking about this moment in the life of the church that is changing, and specifically about the opportunity and challenges that the church is facing as it relates to building and land. You are doing some incredible work out of your church, which is in this small town, the rural context, but having an outsized impact. And I wonder, if I were to turn up at your church on a Sunday, can you tell me, what would I find? What would it be like?
If you came to Mount Baker Presbyterian on a Sunday, you would find a traditional Presbyterian worship service. with a handful of elders that have been in the congregation for, some have been there over 40 years, and I have one congregant whose dad used to be the pastor of the congregation. You'd have that nucleus of people that have been there for so long mixed in with some youth, like my kids would be there, and then you never know who's going to show up in off the street. We could have people coming in that are suffering from drug addiction, mental health issues, homelessness. People this time of year when it's getting cold will just show up for a place to sit in the back and be warm, and we welcome anybody and everybody who walks through our doors.
That's amazing. And that's like one slice of the work you're doing. What's going on at Mount Baker the rest of the week?
The rest of the week is actually pretty packed. We have a secondary site about a mile away from the church where we are a contracted opioid outreach team, where we partner with another drug treatment organization called the Dijwalik Wellness Center that is operated by the Swinomish Indian tribe. And so we have direct access to medically assisted treatment 4 days a week in that building with the opioid outreach team, along with free access to showers and free access to laundry to anybody who might need it. We also have the ability to sign people up directly to the Department of Health and Social Services so people can get on board with whatever resources that they might need. And then we have some amazing contacts with the local hospital to where we can get people enrolled in state health. And all of this is happening Monday through Thursday inside of our red building.
How did your congregation get into that? I mean, how did this sort of start? And how did it
Do you want the
evolve?
long answer to that question, or do you want the short, succinct answer? Because it's a yes and answer. You know, when I was first installed at Mount Baker Presbyterian, I think we sat down and had a congregational meeting, and I think it was the first one that they had actually had in about 5 years. And I asked them what the plan for their church was. And, I had some ideas, but I didn't want to steamroll the congregation. I didn't want to steamroll the session. And so I just calmly said, "What is the plan for your church?" And everybody kind of just looked at me, and I asked it again. And one of the old ladies looked at me and went, "That's why we hired you." I said, "Well, if we're going to go off of my ideas, then we have to start by cleaning ourselves up from the inside out, then work to increase our footprint in the community. We have to start by holding a mirror to ourselves and recognizing all the things that we have become noseblind to. We need to start entering into our church, looking at it through the eyes of a newcomer and asking ourselves, if we were brand new, would we want to worship here? And then fix all of those issues. And then work to increase our footprint in the community. And once we got to that point, we did the most radical thing that we could possibly do. We set forward in creating a cold weather homeless shelter to take place in the social hall of our congregation, which really kind of kicked a hornet's nest in the rural community that we're in. And that's kind of how everything started.
And you are in a small town in a rural community. I mean, a lot of times we get people asking us, well, what can rural churches do? I mean, there's this sort of idea that all the projects that people talk about out there with regard to buildings and land are big housing projects and urban centers and that kind of thing. And those are all cool and all, but what can a rural church do or church in a small town do? And you're obviously doing a lot. What do you say to people like that ask that? Or, I mean, what's your reaction to that?
if the thing that I say and my reaction is kind of, it's intermingled. It's if your building is empty 6 days a week, why isn't it the hub of your community? If your community is vacant of services, why are those services not in your building? So it's kind of a two-part answer there where, if there are services in the community, your building can still be used as the melting pot of the community. If there's not services in the community to help people, I mean, rural communities are directly impacted by poverty, drug addiction, and homelessness that you don't see. And so, how can your rural congregation partner with service providers that want a toehold in rural communities and give them a launching pad and make that launching pad your building? Because as these service providers set up shop and people come in to receive services, and you and your faith community are there periodically, that gives you the opportunity to build relationships. And once relationships are built, then friendships and change can happen. But it starts with being something that your community needs.
Do you all have a way of you sort of articulating or measuring your impact? I mean, do you talk about that? And if so, in what way? Like, what is it that you would measure success by in your setting and with what you're doing?
I would say where we are located, we probably have the highest addiction and homelessness rate per capita of our county. And I can tell you that with having medically assisted treatment and showers and laundry and peer advocates and all those things, I think the biggest success that we have had is in partnering with the Washington State Department of Health and being able to receive Narcan from them. Narcan is a drug that is administered to reverse an overdose or to and I know since June, the end of June this year, that at least 34 kits have been used to reverse overdoses in a community of about 720 in the town, 5,200 geographically. So our greatest success is knowing that 34 times somebody lived because of the effort that we're putting into the community. At that point, it doesn't become about how much money is in our bank accounts or how many people are in our pews. We are literally bringing resources to the community that's saving lives.
Yeah, literally saving lives.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
it's incredible. Like in a community of 720 people, 34 since June. That's in the last 5 months.
Yeah. So concrete is about, I say 720 to 760, depending on where the ebb and flow is geographically, because it's about 80 square miles. It's about 5,200, right? And we, about a mile away from where we are at, there is a community center that does a free meal Monday through Friday, does a free lunch. And recently we had a client come try to get established with medically assisted treatment, didn't have the right kind of identification, any of that stuff. Our team drove him to the free lunch. He went and had lunch, and on his way back to the building, he ended up meeting with some people that he knew, ended up smoking some opioids, whether it was heroin or fentanyl, and ended up overdosing. He was revived by Narcan and came to our building immediately after that overdose and immediately after that resuscitation. We were able to get medics in there and have him checked out. He refused care. And it was, how do we get him into detox? How do we get him? We were looking in other counties. The thing that was holding him back the most was having some kind of identification that could get him enrolled into a medically assisted treatment program. The problem is we couldn't go to the jail and get a copy of his mugshot or anything like that because he had an active warrant. The next day, one of my outreach workers thought through the entire thing and ended up reaching out to somebody who is with an official organization that knew this individual and my staff member really well. Said, hey, is there anything that you can send me so we can get this guy enrolled in services? And that guy said yes. Sent over some stuff right away that was adequate enough for ID for him to get enrolled into a medically assisted treatment program. And he went and started an assessment and got enrolled the day after his overdose. So having creativity and tenacity.
Creativity, tenacity, but also a network and, just, and seeing your role. Like, this is our work to do is what I'm hearing come through. And you said something earlier. You said if your church is empty 6 days a week, like, why? I can't remember, but it's like, if your church is empty 6 days a week, why? Why aren't there people in it? And if your church, if there aren't services in your community, why can't your church be that? And I'm like, and that's what I hear is you've really seen like the role of the church to be the role of the social safety net, to really, really do the work that's needed in the community. And obviously you can't do that alone. So I'm wondering, who are you working with? Like, who are your partners in this work? How, and how do they see you as a pastor, like leading this work? Do they see this as, wow, we're really glad the church is here?
They see us as, yeah, we're really glad that the church is here. In 2019, Skagit County commissioners sent out a letter to all of the faith communities in Skagit County, pleading with them to open their doors and create a safe place for the homeless to go during the cold weather season. And Mount Baker Presbyterian, a church of maybe 5 people at the time, were the only ones that answered that call. And so when we entered into that process, and the way that we conducted ourselves and the way that we engaged not only with the community, but within county government as well, that created a pathway forward for us as far as an organization that could be trusted and relied upon. The problem is right after that happened, right after we did that homeless shelter, COVID hit. And so it was one of those, do we quietly pass ourselves into oblivion, or do we roll the dice and focus on a community with an insane amount of needs and focus all of our efforts there? I'm a risk taker and disruptor by nature, so that's the direction that I went. Coming out of COVID, Skagit County reached out to us and said, hey, there's this coalition of people that are trying to bring medically assisted treatment to your community. Would you like to be a part of it? And we said yes. And we were introduced to North Sound Behavioral Health Administrative Organizations. They are a regional outfit that spans 5 counties in the northwest corner of Washington. We are the first faith community that they have ever partnered with, and stepping into like the behavioral health world, public health world was interesting because it put us as a church in this weird place of duality where the behavioral health side of things were worried that we were going to over evangelize, and then the faith community side of things were saying that we weren't evangelizing enough when we just wanted to be the hands and feet of Jesus in our neighborhood, right? And to us, that looked like meeting immediate needs and caring for people. And so through that partnership with North Sound ASO, that then connected us to a medically assisted treatment provider at the time, which was Lifeline Connections. And then it also connected us to the local sheriff's department because uh, that partnership helped bring an embedded crisis responder into law enforcement. It also expanded our partnership with public health, Skagit County Department of Public Health. And from there, as we started to embark and work, we just started getting more partners and more partners and more partners. And I think, I mean, we probably have anywhere from 7 to 12 partners that we actively engage with on a regular basis, depending on what our need is at the moment. We have, food banks. We have the community action, the nonprofit that does all the energy resource stuff like that. We have North Sound Accountable Communities of Health, which has helped us to receive some funding to bolster our impact in the community. That has also lent us administrative support to help us write policies for the work that we're doing, because I don't think any church out there has a policy manual on how to do opioid outreach in an impoverished community, right? So, like, where's the boundaries? What are our roles and responsibilities? I don't know how to write that stuff. And so we brought partners in to help us do that.
Started, you said you were a congregation of 5 and in a community with a lot of need. And I just want to know, like, how do the resources work to do your work? And yeah.
So the resources to do our work, my wife Danielle and I thought outside the box originally. We were working for another ministry as jail chaplains and outreach workers, and we had a fundraising platform that we used to support our salary through that work. And so when we went full time to Mount Baker, we brought that individual fundraising model to support our work. And so we started out by fundraising for our own salaries. The church would pay a little bit towards my salary and a little bit towards my health insurance. And I wrote a proposal to Northwest Coast Presbytery asking them to help support us financially for 3 years to get it up off the ground and get it running. It was a 3-year step down plan. They said yes. And so they started investing some money. When we partnered with North Sound ASO, we ended up getting written into a HRSA grant, which is a federal grant to bring medically assisted treatment to rural communities. With that, we ended up getting about $30,000 a year. So $90,000 in total is a 3-year grant. Not a whole lot of money, but enough to help pay the wages of somebody, of another staff member to be there a couple of days a week as we grew the program. We continued writing a couple of grants here and there. I wrote a proposal two proposals to North Sound ACH. You got both of them funded. One of those proposals helped fund mine and Danielle's salary for an entire year, so we could take a break from fundraising. And then coming to the end of 3 years with this HRSA grant, we were asked to submit a funding request by North Sound ASO to continue the work in the community, and we were awarded $235,000 a year that is renewable every year. So that money goes to pay Danielle's salary, to manage the program, 2 staff workers, pays for fuel and outreach supplies on our outreach van. And then we also partnered with the Skagit County Department of Public Health to pay for the building that we're renting. So we were awarded about $35,000 a year from them to pay for our rent, utilities, building supplies, toilet paper towels, all that stuff. Keep the work going. Yeah.
But it's become a really robust program, and your team has grown, your partners have grown, your church, your congregation's grown, because from, yeah.
Yeah.
Is this the work you thought you'd be doing when you went to Mount Baker?
I never I never in a million years thought I would be a pastor. Never in a million years. Like, um, I am not your prototypical pastor. Uh, I come from a life of incarceration, drug addiction, and homelessness. My highest grade level is a GED that I got when I was 16, just so I could move out of my parents' house so I could be on my own. Um, it took me until about the age of, I don't know, 35 or 36 to quit going in and out of jail. And Danielle and I now both have about 10 and a half years clean and sober. Um, and it, it, it started to become one of those things that, if we could do it, why can't other people? And one of the things that I had seen a lot of was people that would get to a certain point in their own journey of recovery that they would start looking down at people who were still suffering. And I said, I never want to be that person. I want to be the person that helps to lift people out of that suffering. And then actually, once they get to a point, push them out ahead of me. And yeah. So no, I never thought I'd be here. And it's actually quite insane.
What are some of the one or two of the key people or moments that changed that for you?
Corey Slosher Hall. If it wasn't for him, I don't think I'd still be in ministry. In all honesty, I got invited out to this tiny congregation to do a sermon once after they heard my story. They kept asking me to come back and asking me to come back. And then one day they said, "Hey, will you just come be our pastor?" And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. And through the PCUSA and the Book of Order, there's a way to ordain a member of the congregation that's a ruling elder into a lay pastor or a commissioned ruling elder or a commissioned pastor. It depends on what part of the country you're in. It's how they call it. Here we call it commissioned pastors. And Northwest Coast Presbytery created a on-the-job learning internship for me. So it was, let's look at what you've learned in ministry while working at this other ministry, and then let's build around what you don't know, and let's go teach it to you. And so then Doug Bennell from First Pres up in Bellingham, he's my mentor. He started out as my mentor, and he still is my mentor. He's been a huge help in all this, especially when it comes to polity, because polity can be really annoying. So I call him and say, "Hey, how can I work through this?" He is one of the most encouraging people I have ever met in my entire life. There's Reverend Matt McCoy of Spring Church. I meet with him every Monday for prayers. We talk about the week that we had before and the week that we got coming up, and we pray for each other. But most importantly, I couldn't do it without the support of my wife and family. Because, for me to say yes to the things that I say yes to, it means that I have to say no to some things with them. And for them to support me to keep doing this is the greatest support of it all.
One of the questions that we hear a lot in the larger ecosystem is around leadership for this sort of work. Like, how does that happen? How does leadership get developed? How do we find the right people to lead? I mean, you're describing a situation where, as you said, and it's true, you're not the typical pastor, the way, at least in the Presbyterian Church, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet you're exactly the right person for this role and in this moment and in that place. What do you think about that? How do we find the right people? How do we raise up the right people? How do we think about leadership in this time where what it means to be church is
You
changing so
know,
much.
I think we need to start, for all the reasons we say we can't do something, they need to be the reasons that we do something. Right? So, you know, we all come to the table with our own personal, social, economic view of the world that we have lived through, and if you put all of that together, it illuminates Christ in a different way. Because if you think of it, uh, each person illuminates a piece of Christ in a different way that you might not have seen before. So I think it starts with a curiosity, being curious about what the Spirit wants to do instead of focusing on what our order or our doctrine might be. I think uh, it, it starts with a willingness to try something new and scary. Um, you know, we had a meeting with our session this week, and we presented the 2025 budget, and there's a huge deficit in the budget, and it was just like, God has never let us down. We've never been without. Our lights have always stayed on. Everybody's always gotten a paycheck. We should not be afraid of this. God is obviously calling us to do something. God is calling us to do the work that we're doing. He is going to sustain us. And so when it comes to leaders and church properties and all of those things, I think the thing that we forget is that none of it actually belongs to us. And if we hold on to it with ownership, then we are actually restricting the movement of the Spirit. And if we can let go of that ownership, and, I think there's it when Nicodemus visits Jesus in the middle of the night, and he says, the Spirit is like the wind. You don't know where it comes from or where it goes. You just know that it's there. And I think we need to tap into that more. We need to. I mean, the unknown's scary for everybody, but it. Sometimes you just gotta go. You just gotta do it. You gotta elevate that person that might make you uncomfortable because he makes you question how you view the world. Right? Sometimes you got to listen to that old man that's so stuck in his ways because he's teaching you something about a generation that you know nothing about, but it teaches you how to engage better. Sometimes you got to present people and congregations and presbyteries with a different view of the Book of Order, because our polity is just like the Bible. Everybody reads it through their own lens. So you need to be able to pull out the thing, be willing to have people pull out the things that they might not have seen before and trust you in pointing it out. Got to be reckless. And, like a creative recklessness. Yeah. I don't know if that answered your question, but
I don't know, but I love that phrase, creative recklessness. Like you got to be creative, reckless, creative, reckless. Okay. I know some things are developing. Some things are on the horizon. Like you're not just sitting still with what you've got going on. I wonder when you look down the road 5 years from now, what do you see? What are you? What's on the horizon?
one of the things that some colleagues of mine and I have started doing is looking at properties of the presbytery and how they are coming back to us. and what is it that we do with them when they come back. One of the first things that I learned is that every congregation has a life cycle. And eventually some congregations do come to a close. And when that happens, there's generally buildings with deferred maintenance and minimal assets that come back that become a financial drain on the presbytery or whatever denomination you're a part of. So we started going, how can we still hold on to these properties, but not make them a financial drain on the overall denomination? And it was taking a look at what we had, making an idea to strategically sell a couple properties to fund capital improvements in others. So that way we could continue to keep a foothold in our communities that the saints that came before us fought so hard for. And continue to partner with Christ and the Spirit in those communities by partnering with other nonprofits or other entities, or if some crazy person like myself comes along and wants to plant a church in one of them. And so right now, we have a property here in Cedar Woolley. It's the second half of the property is completely undeveloped. And we have this crazy idea of let's plant a new worshiping community inside this church and then build transitional housing in the back, because transitional housing is the biggest gap in Skagit County as far as services go right now. We have homeless shelters that, expect people to get clean and sober and their whole life rebuilt in 90 days. And that model doesn't work, right? And so there's nothing in between. And so our idea is to, what we're calling the River Project, is to partner with the local hospital, which is right next door, a couple of behavioral health organizations, and get some people from the presbytery and annex the property into the city proper. It's zoned in a way that the bottom floor has to be industrial or commercial, excuse me. And then you can put housing up above. And so the idea is to put a cafe and service providers in the commercial space. The hospital wants room for respite care, for people to go, that that can't be held in the hospital medically. They don't have a medical necessity to stay in the hospital, but they still need care with with bandage changes and stuff like that they could go to. And then the third floor would be transitional housing for people coming out of homeless shelters, addiction, incarceration, homelessness, things of that nature, where we could create a program, a 16 to 24 month program where people would have stable living, that they could get connected with case managers and work to rebuild their life without a fear of losing their housing, while planting a non-traditional church in the front. My oldest son, Asher, was diagnosed with autism. And, my wife is ADHD. I'm ADHD. Pretty sure our other two kids are neurodivergent as well. And, the normal flow of church is hard for us. Like, even me as the pastor planning the worship service, and, church is hard. So we want to create a space where anybody can come in and feel welcome. And that mask that we all put on when we walk into a congregation, that we only showing what we want that body to see. We want to create a place where people can check that at the door, where kids can run crazy in the middle of the service and just be their everything. The worst feeling in the world is when I'm out in public and one of my kids is melting down because they're neurodivergent and you can feel people staring at you. Well, that's amplified in a church. And so we want to create a space where instead of people staring at us, the community comes and says, "You're doing an amazing job. How can we help you?" Because we need to flip that. We need to flip what's happening outside of the halls in that way, and create safe places for people who are a little bit different.
I just that thing that you're desiring, we want people in the community to see we're doing a good job and we help. I mean, I could imagine you have people saying that all the time and if you don't, I just feel like I want to shake people because it feels like, man, you're doing the transformative work, both for people and the community.
This transformative work isn't just uh, isn't just transforming the people that we care for. It's transforming us as well. You know, we've been able to do things like when Danielle and I got clean and sober, even 7 years in. We were living in a little 2-bedroom house about 6 blocks from here. We called it Harry Potter's closet because it was so small, but it was all we could afford because it was only $900 a month. We never dreamed we could own a house until somebody stepped forward and offered to help us figure our stuff out. And we ended up having $136,000 in debt from our addictions that we're never going to get out of this. And um, this individual and their family ended up paying for a bankruptcy attorney. And within 2 years, we were able to buy a house. And within 3 years, we were debt free. And so we started going, how can we do this for other people that are just like us? And so one of the grants that I wrote was specifically to pay off legal financial obligations for individuals and to pay off back child support, because those are things that will garnish wages. And in the Washington State, the Department of Child Support can take up to 50% of a person's wages. And so that is a huge contributor to relapse and recidivism. And so we got some money to go help some folks out. We started out with one guy whose restitution as a co-defendant was at $88,000. We got the prosecutor to split it up into thirds, so he was only responsible for a third of the debt. Got all of the interest waived and got him down to about $8,000, and then we paid it off for him and gave him his life back. Had another guy that he had back child support, he had LFOs, he had all the things, and I remember walking into the courthouse with him with the cashier's check so he could pay it all off, and he was shaking. He was so scared. We went and paid that stuff off for him on his birthday. By his birthday the following year, he had bought a house. Like, so the investment that people have invested in us and to help transform us because of the work that we're doing, we don't hold that just to us. We go out and figure out how we can find that same thing for other people who are in the same boat that we're in and bless them in the same way that we've been blessed. Because if we're hoarding it, we're not doing it correctly.
Well, the whole thing we wanted to get across in this episode is when people say, what about rural churches? Can rural churches do anything with their building and land? And what about small churches? Can small churches do anything with their building and land? What we want to say is, oh my gosh, yes, there's so much you can do.
Yeah, I mean, any rural church that wants to step out and do something boldly, they have a blank canvas, and nobody knows their community better than they do. So they have a blank canvas on what they can do and what they can create and what they can dream up to create change in their community, to help those who are hurting, suffering, or different than the normal status quo.
We've been asking a series of rapid fire questions. So we might have to change these a bit, but yeah, I'd love I'd love to know, what is one thing that you wish people in the pew knew?
When is when? Whose pews? My pews or pews in general?
It's a great question. Pews in general.
Pews in general. That all of this is temporary and it's okay to love unconditionally and recklessly.
Hmm.
What is one thing you wish seminaries that are training pastors in the old traditional
That
way?
the
Yeah.
way that they're training them in the old traditional way doesn't actually prepare them to be successful in ministry. It prepares them how to read a book and pull out a text, but it doesn't teach them how to relate to people.
What do you wish that they were learning,
I
or we were all
wish
learning?
um, that traditional seminaries would open their doors to people like me, to be able to come in and help teach a class or to help create some sort of program in the in the normal trajectory of things to look at ministry through a different lens. Um, yeah, I looked at you know I talked to Princeton at one point in time, and they're like, "You'd be a great student, but you don't have an undergrad, so sorry." I'm like, we have to get past that. People's life experience is greater than any degree that is out there.
If you were going to start all again, like be a pastor, move into Mount Baker Presbyterian community, would you do it all again?
No, I would have stayed in construction or building houses. No, I mean, it depends. Like if I know what I know now, stepping in, yeah, definitely, because I've taken my lumps and share bruises, and I've fallen flat on my face in front of plenty of people. Um, you know, but this role and this place that I'm in has changed my life. It's changed my wife's life. It's changed lives of people around us. And I think it would be selfish if I didn't do it again. So yeah, I would do it again.
Well, finally, we're asking everyone, all the guests on this season, one question. As you consider the reality of the world and the witness of the church today, what is your hope for the church?
It's a really good question. I mean, there's all kinds of like different like little flighty ideas of like, oh, peace, love, and harmony, and this and that and this and um. I think my hope for the church for the future is that we can get back to the place that we once were. And what I mean, and I don't mean like, when, uh, our parents' church was doing all this cool stuff. What I mean by that is there used to be a point in time where people of opposing theological or just social viewpoints could go sit down and have a cup of coffee together. They could argue bitterly over that entire cup of coffee about their differences. And once they left, they would remain friends. And if anybody outside of that conversation tried to say something about the other, the response would be, no, that is a man of conviction and I respect them. And I think my hope for the future is that we can get back to that place again, because it seems like it's not here right now. Um, my hope for the future is that we are able to stand in the place of respect for each other's convictions, and whatever those convictions are, but to have a humble relationship with each other in that space.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for your time and your work and for the way that you really are demonstrating love, like real radical, reckless love in your community.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. I'm
So
I'm
great
so
to
glad
hear
you
your
guys are my
story and
friends
talk to you some
now.
more.
Because I love that I can bug the crap out of you via email. And Mark, I love that I can annoy the crap out of you with messages on Instagram. So it's great.
Well, we do. We do.